Hello everyone. Today we have an unusual guest. It's Kalle Heikkinen. I hope that pronunciation is right. And his lecture will be about mobile games genre. It's named "Mobile Game Genre Are Dead. Long Life for New Genres." He is a senior chief game analyst at GameRefinery in China. And welcome. Let's start.
Great. Hey, thank you for the excellent introduction. Let me just share my, make this a slideshow. That's probably a good idea. Here we go. All right. So yeah, as was just mentioned, this presentation will be about mobile game genres and how we approach the sort of categorization of different games in the mobile markets that we live in at the moment. And without further ado, let's get started. And feel free to ask any questions to the chat, and after the presentation, I will definitely be checking them out and really looking forward to any kind of questions you guys might have. And before we get to the actual topic of today, I thought that it might be interesting to just give you a brief intro to who I am. So my name is Kalle Heikkinen, and I work at GameRefinery as a senior analyst, mainly focusing on all things China, and a bit more specifically focusing on keeping our database of Chinese games as up to date and as comprehensive as possible. So we game analysts at GameRefinery do play a lot of games, because one key component of the data that we provide at our platform is the sort of manual tagging of game features to games and game breakdowns. So that's where people like me and my analyst colleagues come in. So we have different teams for each of the different geographical markets. And for example, my responsibility area is the Chinese market. So I'll get to play a lot of Chinese top grossing games and map out their feature sets and do game breakdowns of them. Also, maybe a quick intro to GameRefinery as well, if there is someone in the audience who is not that familiar with what we do. So GameRefinery is the leading mobile games data company providing feature level data and beyond. So lately we've been expanding our data offerings also outside feature level data. So we have revenue and downloads data, we have motivations data, demographics data, and multiple other different data verticals available. But one of the things that makes GameRefinery such a unique service is that we also have this feature level data of games. So basically all the top 200 crossing games mapped out on a feature level, and since we have a quite big database of game analysis available nowadays, it's very interesting then to draw insights from that database on things like what are the sort of feature trends in different kinds of categories or subgenres or genres, or for instance, what are the differentiating features? So meaning that what are the features that the top games have versus the games that are outside the top crossing. But enough of me and enough of GameRefinery. If you're interested in GameRefinery, I highly recommend going to GameRefinery.com and checking us out. But let's get to the topic of today, which is the genre classification, the genre taxonomy that we have created, and maybe one thing to ask here at the beginning is that why did we do it? Why does our industry need a new way to categorize games? And if we start from the basics, I guess it's pretty self-evident that understanding the market and the market composition in today's market conditions is extremely important, so that you know which games are your competitors, you know what kind of games in that space are finding success, what are the different components that make them successful. So you need to understand that what are the different market segments and the different genres that are relevant to you and to your company or your games. And understanding the different genres in mobile gaming is very important, also because of the fact that the range of different products and user profiles is also quite big. So if we, for example, look at a hyper-casual game or a Chinese MMORPG, we can definitely agree that there's quite a lot of different things that go into producing and developing these two different mobile games. And if you want to truly comprehend what your game is up against and what is the market potential in that space in the market, you need to be able to segment the market in a very meaningful way. And that's why you need some sort of genre classification system. And if we look at how things are at the moment, there's no really a unified genre taxonomy available that would adequately capture various games mechanics and then group them efficiently. So traditionally, many people in the industry have been relying on the App Store genres, for example, but they are very confusing, very vague. They overlap. There's multitude of different kinds of problems that are related to the App Store genre. So, for example, if we look at these two pictures that we have here, we have games like Choices, which is an interactive story game, and Tap Titans 2, which is a idler game under role playing, which is quite interesting. Another example here we have under action genre, we have Command and Conquer Rivals, which is a tactical battler, and we have Raid Shadow Legends, which is a turn-based RPG. So that is quite also interesting bunch of games that we have under this genre. So definitely the Apple App Store genres are not solving these problems that I just mentioned in a very efficient way. So there is definitely a demand for a more meaningful segmentation of the market. And after setting up the problem and deciding that okay, it's a problem that we need to solve, and we need to find a way to solve it, we started out thinking that what would then be the key requirements for a good genre taxonomy. And we came up with 3 prerequisites for the taxonomy. The first one that we wanted to cover with the taxonomy is coverage. So in the mobile games market, there are so many different types of games available, as I said, ranging from those hyper-casual games to very hardcore MMORPGs. So the new genre taxonomy that we would create would have to cover this diversity in its entirety. It would also need to be flexible, because the mobile games market changes all the time. just a couple of years back, we didn't have, for example, battle royale games, but now that's something that needs to be classified as their own subgenre. Another example is idle RPGs, for example. So that's a sort of a new subgenre that didn't exist a couple of years back. So we need to be able to modify the taxonomy as the market shifts. And then thirdly, the level of detail. So if we want to provide actionable insights, it needs to be detailed enough to differentiate games in a meaningful way. But of course, too much detail will result in a situation where you have sub genres that only have representation of like 2 games, for example. So that's not very interesting information for most of the people or industry experts looking at the market. And after we then set up these criteria for the taxonomy, we started building the taxonomy then. And what we decided to do is that we created a taxonomy that uses a 3-layered approach to categorize games. And on the top layer, we have categories. We have 4 different categories. They are sort of the high-level differentiation, differentiating sort of like a simple, so meaning like casual games, from the more complex kind of games, meaning the mid-core games. We also wanted to separate casino games from casual and mid-core because they just have such a distinctive nature and game mechanics. And one additional thing that we did was that we also separated sports and driving games, because the average player profiles for those kinds of games are so different as well. So the 4 categories that we came up with are casual games, mid-core games, casino, and sports and driving. After setting up the first layer, the upmost layer, the category layer, we then went a bit deeper and added the second layer, which is the genre layer. So all the 4 different categories can be then divided further into genres. So casual games, for instance, they are split into 6 genres. They are LB, hyper-casual, arcade, puzzle, lifestyle, and simulation. Mid-core games, we divided into 4 different genres. So shooter games, RPG games, card games, and strategy. And then casino is pretty straightforward. It's casino games. And then in sports, we divided them to sports and driving games. So they are also pretty straightforward. Then the deepest layer of our genre taxonomy is the subgenre level, because the categories and genres alone, they're not enough to go into such a deep level of genre classification that is required in many market research tasks. So, for example, if you are interested in puzzle games, you might still be interested in comparing, for example, how match-tree puzzle differ from word puzzle. So we needed that kind of differentiation as well. And the subgenre level gives us that level of detail. And it's also giving us the needed flexibility, so we're able to remove subgenres, add new subgenres, if we see that the market is going to a direction that we are not currently covering adequately enough. So these are the subgenres that we're currently using. We have 52 subgenres, as you can see from the picture on the left-hand side. And if we go back to the sort of 3 criteria that we set out for this categorization, we can see that this taxonomy actually fulfills them pretty well. So it does cover the market, because essentially all games that we have in the market, they can be pinpointed into one category, genre, subgenre combination. So, for example, Candy Crush Saga would be a match 3 game under puzzle, which would be under casual. It is also flexible, as I already mentioned. We can remove subgenres, we can add new subgenres. To give you some examples, originally we didn't have idle RPGs, but after seeing the market shift, especially in the Chinese market, we thought that it would be in order to sort of meet the market demands, we would need to add idle RPGs as their own RPG subgenre to the mid-core section. And this taxonomy also provides us with a sufficient level of detail, as it captures the diverse nature of various genre games. And next up, I'd like to just give you one example of then how these genres can be used in action. And as an example, I've chosen RPG. And before we take a look at how we can look at the RPG market from different angles, I thought it would be a good idea to just give you an idea of what we mean with the different RPG subgenres. So first of all, we have action RPGs. These games are usually games where you as a player, you control one hero character at a time. Real-time combat is usually the way to go in these games. You have these skills and stuff like that. And the game world is often restricted, so it's not an MMO type of open world. Instead, you have these different levels that you complete. They usually take you up like 1 to 3 minutes to complete them, and then you do other things. You upgrade your characters and stuff like that, and then you go to the next level. And you oftentimes don't have a big character roster that you can expand. You can expand or upgrade. Instead, it's usually about having a single or a very restricted amount of characters that you upgrade. Of course, one exception to the sort of action RPG rule is Genshin Impact. So that's definitely an action RPG that utilizes an open world setting. Then we have Mmorpgs. In these games, you usually have one character that you control. In China, we also have these 2D Mmorpgs where you have a turn-based combat layer, and in these games, you actually control a team of characters. But if we talk about, especially if we talk about the Western MMO market, it's usually about real-time combat with skills and synergies, and the turn-based sort of having a turn-based combat in an MMORPG is definitely a China thing. And in MMORPGs, it's all about the massive open world that you explore. And you have, in the West especially, you have a single character meta, but in Chinese MMORPGs, it's not that uncommon actually to see a large character roster as well. Then we have fighting games. In these games, players control one hero character at a time. It's real-time fighting with reaction focus, restricted world, so you go from one stage to another, and character development meta layer with an pretty large character roster. So games like Marvel Contest of Champions fall into the fighting subgenre. Turn-based RPGs then often have several characters that you control. Combat is turn-based, restricted world, except in the Chinese turn-based RPG MMOs. And you have a character development meta layer with a large character roster. And then a couple of more puzzle RPGs. These are the games that combine match 3 mechanics to RPG elements. So core gameplay is usually match 3. And then the meta layer is about developing different kinds of characters. And in these games, you also go from one stage to another. So there is no open world available. Survival is probably the most niche of these subgenres. Pretty similar to MMO in a way, but in these games it's more about surviving and scavenging of different kinds of materials and items and stuff like that. And then last but not least, idle RPGs. Pretty similar to turn-based RPGs in many ways, but it's even more. It's very the core layer is usually very automated, and you have this sort of an idle mechanic thing going on, meaning that you, even if when you're not playing the game, you still get certain kind of rewards that you can then obtain when you come back to the game. All right, so that was a quick intro to our RPG subgenres. And as you can see, all of these subgenres can be meaningfully differentiated from the others. So they are pretty distinct genres. And that enables us to then research these different types of games and find out that what are the different elements in these games, for example, that are driving their success. Now we can get to the examples of how we can then utilize this genre taxonomy. So we can, for example, research the RPG market in different geographical markets. So here we're looking at the top 500 grossing games, and we are looking at the second quarter of this year, first starting off with the US market. And we can see when we look at the RPG space, we can see that RPG has 13% revenue market share inside top 500 crossing. And here we can also see that what was its change. If we look at a year-on-year change, 2019, 2020, we can see how has it changed. So we put in the case of RPG in US, there's not that big of a change in its market share. In Japan, we saw a bit more significant drop, 5.64%. RPG games have 51% market share of the Japanese top 500 crossing, so significantly bigger market share than in the US, which is quite interesting. And then in China, the market share numbers are pretty similar to Japan, so 47% here. But if we look at a year-on-year change, we can see that in China, RPG games actually witnessed a drop of more than 7%. We can see this in more detail in the next slide, but this was mostly attributed to the relatively poor performance of MMORPGs, or rather, there were other subgenres that were just performing better and taking up the market share of RPG games in China. Then we can go to the subgenre level. We're now established that the RPGs are very big in Japan and China. In comparison to those markets, in the US, RPG not that big. But maybe we want to know that what are the different RPG subgenres then that have the biggest market shares inside RPG. So first looking at the US market here. And again, we're looking at the Q2 of this year. And we have the RPG games here, and now we can see that what are the different RPG subgenres that have the biggest market shares inside RPG. So in the US, turn-based RPGs have 52% revenue market share inside the RPG genre. So you can say that in the US, when you look at RPG games, turn-based RPGs are the ones that are the most successful ones. The second biggest one is puzzle RPGs, 20%. And then if we look at some of the more smaller subcategories, we can see that, for example, survival and MMORPGs are pretty niche in the US market, so only 3 and 6% in the US. In the Japanese market, it's also all about turn-based RPGs, and actually even more. So 65% of the top 500 crossing revenue market share is going to turn-based RPGs. The second biggest in Japan is also puzzle RPG. And just like in the US, MMORPGs and survival have pretty small market shares when compared to these others. Then the third one is China. It's a bit different. So MMORPGs are actually constituting more than 50% of the Chinese RPG market. And then the second biggest one is turn-based RPGs, but also a significant number of idle RPGs in the market as well. And maybe something to note is that there are close to 0 puzzle RPGs in the top 500 crossing market, which is actually quite interesting. So yeah, that's the situation in China. And then I also listed out here the biggest movers when comparing the Q2s of last year and this year. So we can see that in the US, turn-based RPGs were able to increase their revenue market share by 10%. In Japan, puzzle RPGs lost 5%. And as I mentioned earlier, in China, Mmorpgs market share, even though it's 51%, but it was actually almost 70% in Q2 of 2019. So it's dropped 17%, which is quite significant. All right. So that's how you can do market share on a subgenre level. There are other ways as well to do market shares, market research with the genres. So, for example, you can look at the US market and realize that turn-based RPGs, they make 7% of all the revenues during this quarter. Then you can zoom in to this particular subgenre that you're interested in and take a look at the individual games and see that, okay, top 5 turn-based RPGs, they're actually responsible for 45% of all revenue in this space, which is quite interesting. And then you can go even deeper than that. So maybe now that you know the top games in this subgenre, you can then take a look at their feature sets. And for example, see that all top 100 crossing turn-based RPGs are utilizing this mechanic, this game feature called non-competitive co-op tasks. All of the top 100 have it. But if we look at games outside top 100, it's only 32% that have this feature. And you could go even deeper than this. You could, for example, take a look at different kinds of implementations of how these non-competitive co-op tasks have been implemented in different kinds of turn-based RPGs. So and giving and in that way you could get an idea of how you could perhaps implement it in your own game as well. So there's really a lot of different things you can utilize the genres. So summarizing, this all. We established in the beginning that a new genre taxonomy is definitely something that we need to sort of be able to map out the market landscape that we have in mobile gaming. The current methods, the current tools to do that are not the perfect ones. For example, the Apple App Store genres are not that good in many use cases. At GameRefinery, we have this tested and effective three-layered approach that I discussed in this presentation that can tackle this challenge in a very efficient fashion. And as I mentioned, our approach, the three-layered approach, it uses three different layers, so category level, genre level, and then subgenre level. And through this taxonomy, then you have significantly better tools than to, for example, check out your competition, look out what are the top games in that category, what are the games that used to be on the top but are not there anymore, what kind of updates have your biggest competitors rolled out to their games, what kind of effects have those updates have to their performance, how have they implemented different kinds of features, how are they performing in different geographical markets, what are their user demographics, what are the different things that motivate the players of their games, and so on. So there's really a lot of different ways that you can utilize the taxonomy. And if I just have to put it short, it just helps you to just basically make better decisions in every stage of the development life cycle and across all the roles in the company, ranging from product managers to game designers to data analysts and market researchers and so on. So giving you very valuable tool to categorize the market landscape. So yeah, just want to say thank you. At this point, if you are interested in knowing more about genre taxonomy or interested in knowing more about how we approach mapping out the market or anything I've discussed today, feel free to send me an email. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm there. You can find me by my name there. And of course, feel free to go to GameRefinery.com. There's actually a free layer of the service available, so you can access that and check out the different kinds of tools that we have in there. So thank you for participating in this presentation, and I'm very much looking forward to any questions you might have.
Thank you for a good lecture. It was very interesting. And if you have some questions, guys, please write it in chat and we will answer it. I have also some questions. You are like an analyst. I want to ask your opinion why RPGs is so popular in East Asian countries. Why only there?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, I would probably start from there's a couple of different things that comes to my mind. The first thing, if we, for example, first discuss China, is that it's traditionally it has been very PC driven geographical market for gaming. And if we look at the different kinds of PC games that have been popular in China, they have been different kinds of RPGs and mostly MMO RPGs. So it has been very natural for the Chinese developers to bring those experiences that have worked on PC the mobile side as well, and they just happen to be RPG games and most notably MMORPGs. Well, and then the follow-up question might be, why have Chinese been very into RPGs in the PC? Then I would say that I think for the Chinese audience, it very much look like that they are not afraid of trying out more sort of complex experiences and games that have very deep meta layers and progression mechanics and stuff like that. So they are perhaps not that much interested in very compelling core gameplay innovations, but having deep meta systems and different progression verticals and different kinds of progression systems, and being able to socialize. I think that's also a thing that is very important for many Chinese players, that you have the systems in the games that allow you to play together with your friends or other players, play against your friends or other players, form these communities and stuff like that. And RPG games are excellent games. It's an excellent genre for that kind of purpose, because it allows you to have different kinds of communal systems and PvP systems and progression systems and so on. So I think there are many elements in RPG games that are of interest to Chinese gamers, and I would say that many things also apply to Japan as well, and they have traditionally, of course, they don't have that big of a PC background, but then if we think about how they've been playing on consoles, of course, we all know the big RPG gaming series like Final Fantasies and stuff like that. So they definitely have this history of being interested in playing RPG games, and I think that has also been transitioned to the mobile side as well.
Oh, okay, thanks. And another one question is, which genre you think can take this crown of RPG in future? Because now RPG in China and Japanese, it's a more popular genre. Maybe some another genre will take this crown of RPG.
You mean in the East, in China and Japan?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I don't see anything threatening the dominance of different kinds of RPG games in China or in Japan. The Japanese are so much into turn-based RPGs. They just love the different kinds of gacha mechanics that you have in games, and they just fit so well with RPG games. So with that said, there has been some interesting movements to Japanese market, for example, in the sports space. So certain sports games, there's this one football game and one baseball game, can't remember their names, but they have been performing extremely well lately, and quite likely they have also, of course, very different experiences compared to RPGs, and I'm not saying that they have taken sort of the market share of RPGs, but definitely they have increased in importance in the Japanese market and grown and scaled up and grow the sports space and sports market in Japan. So I think there might be some other categories and genres that might grow, but is it going to be a danger for the RPGs? That I don't think so. And I think in China it's even more difficult for any other genres to get to the same level as RPGs, and especially MMORPGs are. So at least in the near future, I don't see anything coming in the way of RPGs in the East.
Oh, okay, thanks. Like I see, we don't have any other questions. So Thank you for your lecture. It was very interesting. It was very new information for us. Join our conference again. We will glad to see you again. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.